Hey everyone, welcome back to Ameripolish Academy Online. In today's video, we're actually going to be teaching you how to do a stencil. We've brought in FloorMaps Incorporated. We've got Caitlin here. We're going to be using the Ameripolish SureLock Dyes, Ameripolish ColorSolve, and 3DSP to seal the floor. Caitlin's going to tell you a little bit more about the stencil we're doing today.
Hi, we're doing a Tribecca pattern. This is our most common pattern used in big box retail stores. In our video today, we're going to be showing you the problems that can arise when installing a panel and how to properly install our stencils.
Awesome. So we're going to go ahead and clean the floor up and get ready to go. Okay, so before Rachel gets started putting down her stencil, I want to point out that traditionally a stencil should be put down at a 400 grit when you're using traditional tooling. Now this floor we use Smart Floor Refinement System tooling on, which is a little bit different. It's at the equivalent of a 1500 grit, but the Smart Floor Refinement System tooling does not create resin transfer, which is going to allow for better dye penetration, along with the ColorSolve, which also allows for better dye penetration. So normally 400 grit for stencils, but this is a little bit higher. This floor is actually finished, but it's still going to be okay.
All right, so before you get started, once everything is prepped and ready to go, and the floor is completely clean, auto scrub the floor so there's no dust or debris on the surface. You'll use measuring tape and your chalk line, and you're going to square off the area that you're going to be working on, and that's what we're about to do first. All right, so once we've applied the chalk lines and we have the area that we're going to be working with squared off, there's two things that I want to point out. We're going to install our first panel at the focal point of the area that you're going to be working on. So generally you're going to have an aisleway on the other side of where this pattern is located, and you would never start at the back wall and work your way forward to the aisle. You always start at the aisleway that's squared off and work your way back. The second point I'd like to make is that this very first panel that's installed is the most important panel. It's your cornerstone panel that affects the alignment of this panel, will affect how all the rest of the panels lay out and whether it's skewed or not. So this one is very important that you make sure that it's aligned properly and installed correctly before you continue on with the additional panels. All right, so we've installed the cornerstone panel piece in its place, and we're about to install this next panel. Now with the Tribecca pattern, along the edge of the panel along the edge of these petals is where you're actually going to align the next panel so that there is an overlap of one panel to the next. And we have this specific design made so that you butt up against the already installed petal. And I'll show closer up. Always pull straight back, never pull up. Always pull straight back. Okay, let's do that again with the up. Never pull straight up like this. Always pull straight back like this. No, yes. No, yes. You see this overlap where the material overlaps over the top of it? You have to seam this in. If you do not do this, you will have lines. This is an important, tedious step that must be done. Especially if you are using a water-based dye, have a concern that there's going to be a bleed. You can cut the crease right through, and then I suggest just pressing it down without pulling any of the material up, because whenever you do that, you run the risk of it not sticking down properly the second time. All right, we're about to install a panel along this edge right here, and this blue tape is going to represent a wall or a casement of some sort that you have to install the pattern up against that's already existing. So in order to do that, there's a few ways to do that. You can't install it typically like you would in stabilizing the material down the center of the panel, installing one side and then installing the other. Because of the placement, it's impossible to do that easily. So we're going to show you a different approach to how to install up against the wall with a panel. All right, so I took the measuring tape and I measured my space out, and then I'm going to come over here just to make things easy so I don't have a bunch of excess material that I'm working with. I measured out here and I popped a chalk line, 31.5 inches, and I'm going to cut this material off before I start installing my panel. All right, so we've installed the panel against the wall over here on this side, and that is, we were installing the long edge of the panel, and that's the best way to go about installing against a wall or a casement whenever you have a long edge to the panel. In this case, we have our wall down here, and we're going to install a short edge to the panel. It's a lot easier than doing it against the long edge. We're about to show you how. I'm going to use my measuring tape, and I'm going to find out what the distance is from the end of this panel to the wall itself so that I could trim off any excess off the panel before we start. So of course we have our reference line, our chalked reference line that we had started with. If it's faded throughout the installation process of the other panels, make sure to pop a new chalk line so you have a reference. Now, you do not want to overlap the petals like this. You want it to be butted spot on. If you do overlap the panels, what you're going to end up with is petal material in here that you're going to have to trim out. Does that make sense? All right, so we've stabilized our panel using the traditional method of stabilization, and it's been overlapped over our existing panel, touching right up against the edge of the petals like we had discussed before. Now, whenever we go to install this, since we have a wall on this side, we want to, it's really important to install this side first. Don't install against the wall. You want it to match up to the pattern and then fall into however it's going to disappear into the wall. It's going to disappear into the wall. So it's important to stabilize this side first.
Audio Jungle.
Okay, here's something I want you to show. If you come over here, you want to fold the material this way and fold it this way and then fold the backing paper away. This is how you get it close to stabilizing tape without pulling the design back. Because whenever you pull the design back like this, you're creating a lot of tension on the vinyl itself. Whenever you pull the backing paper away from the design, the tension is on the backing paper, not on the design.
Audio Jungle.
So this right here is an issue as far as it getting trapped underneath the design when we install this panel. So when you cut the backing paper off of the panel itself, you need to make sure to get as straight of a line as possible. It's always much easier. It's always much easier to pull on the second half of the panel to pull from where you've already applied, because the backing paper is already separated. And you just pull straight back. Don't forget there's a wall, so you can't be on this side of the blue tape. So the goal is, it really does require 3 people to install a big panel like this up against the wall, unless you've got 3 arms. So Caitlin and I are gonna hold it as close to the ground as possible, keeping it nice and smooth and straight. And then Brandon's gonna start installing from the center, working his way out. You bring it down further? Yep. Anytime you start to see little weird ripples, you can bring it, it probably needs to go down further. You notice how Brandon is putting a lot of pressure on the vinyl. He's not being, you don't want to just lightly press it onto the surface. This really, you need to put some elbow grease into it when you're applying it. The more pressure, the better. Okay, we're gonna pull off this outside edge of the transfer tape right along. So you don't have to do your side really per se, but this where the next panel is going to be, attached right here. Where the next panel is going to be attached, you want to pull this vinyl off right here. And then someone can come behind and pull off the rest, I'm sorry, not vinyl, transfer tape. You want to pull off this transfer tape along the outside edge so that you can continue installing panels. A team can continue installing panels. So we've gotten to this panel right here, and if we match up these petals along the vertical portion of the panel, these petals over here, there's a slight space. This has a lot to, this is inevitable, it's going to happen, and you just need to make up the difference whenever it's necessary. I would rather see the longest length of the panel match up and to be on, and then this space to be slightly wider, because it's not going to be noticeable once you've dyed the stencil or dyed the exposed area of the concrete and then pull this vinyl off. You're not going to be able to see that this line is slightly thicker. And it's just for you guys to know, it's off by 1/8 of an inch all the way across. Okay, so we're going to install this panel. So when you have vinyl stencil work that's up against the wall, and this blue tape represents the wall, generally, more often than not, you're going to have a lot of dust like this that is right along the edge. It's possible that you could. So the stencil is not going to stick as well. So whenever you're pulling the transfer tape off, it's really important to go along the edge, see how this is not sticking that well. This is how it would be on the concrete surface when there's a lot of dust and debris, or say it's just not cleaned very well. You need to make sure to go along the, do not pull this way, because this is what's going to happen. You want to pull straight back along the edge so that you can control it. That's it. On occasion, you'll have a portion of the design that does not fully stick to the surface. Either the floor wasn't completely cleaned off and there was some dust in that area. For whatever reason, if the vinyl does not completely stick to the floor, it is best to pull up whatever is not sticking. In this case, we had a diamond that didn't stick down all the way, so we ripped it up. You're going to and generally we provide extra material. You're going to pull one of these guys. And you can go so far as to tape off along the top. I generally just will match up one point to another, and stick it down. Voila. Once you get all of the panel work laid down, you're going to go along the edge and overlap with just tape. You need to make sure to get it right to the very edge of the petal. Go around and tape all this off. It's just to give it a more of a buffer. Make sure that this is pressed firmly down to the surface. We do supply 3-inch rolls of our vinyl material that you can use instead if you prefer. Say you run into a problem where you have the panels overlapping like this. Don't be so quick to remove this panel. There's a good chance that you can fix it. And this is how I would fix an area that was overlapping that much. I want there to still be 1/4 of an inch, roughly. So I'm going to start here. And I'm going to come to a point and cut this material off. I'm going to do the same thing on this side. But this time I'm going to come to this point. You see, there's your 1/4 of an inch. So I'm going to radius this down like this. Cut this portion off. Remove it. It helps to have a very sharp X-Acto blade, a precision X-Acto blade. These are nice, but this is not ideal. So it's going to come to that point. You're going to come to a radius edge, this. Do the same thing on this side. So what we're doing is making these petals a little bit shorter, but to the naked eye, you will not be able to tell that they're shorter. Now we've taken some blue tape and we cut it really, really thin. So I'm going to take this blue tape. You might want to trim it a little bit on that side. So that's now our dividing line. I'm going to want to trim some of this off. Oh. And this is why you have a sharp X-Acto. Okay. That's how you.
Okay, so they just finished laying out the stencil, so now I'm going to mix our SureLock dye. We've got Midnight Black here. It goes 1-to-1 with a gallon of ColorSolve. We'll get them mixed up, and then we're going to use a pump sprayer and apply the dye. So let's get started. Okay, so we're finished applying the ColorSolve and SureLock dye. You can see we've removed the stencil, and now we also wash the floor using an automatic scrubber to get the residual dye off the surface. The last thing for us to do is to seal it with 3D SP. So we'll spray, microfiber mop, and burnish, and we'll be good to go. Okay, so we sealed it with the 3DSP and now we have our finished floor. So I really hope you guys enjoyed this video. Special thanks to FloorMaps Incorporated for coming out and helping us with this Tribecca stencil. Hope you learned something and we look forward to seeing you in the next video. If you have any questions about stencils or need any help with stencils, please reach out to FloorMaps. They are the expert and we'll see you next time. Thank you.